All right, we ready?
Sweet.
What's up, guys? How's it going? It would appear that we are all of the same mind right now, all kind of dreading our impending demise.
Oh, I'm excited. I'm really excited for Derek.
For Derek? Oh. All right, what we've got here are, what were they called? Nuclear waste? Is that what toxic waste? Something like that. It's like super sour candies. And then, because that wasn't quite enough, what's up?
It was toxic something.
Toxic waste. But that we've also got a spray bottle that we have filled with a tremendous amount of citric acid. Which I've just tested a few minutes ago to make sure that it is sour enough. And then we let his kid try it. That is also, he loves sour stuff, and he about fell over. So we're going to spray this on the candy. And then those of us that survive will be discussing the Gospels. So we who are about to die salute you.
I'm so nervous.
So Justin has no idea whatsoever. We've already tried them.
Yeah, I'm just going for it.
Just going for it. All right. So we're just.
Whoa, whoa, whoa! Dude, that seems like way too much.
Why didn't you just do 3?
Oh, because I'm a glutton for punishment.
Oh my gosh.
I still feel like actually pouring citric acid on them would have been more sour.
I mean, we got the sprinkles over there if you want
No.
We'll try this and see how devastating it is. Oh.
Yeah. For the Gospels.
So before we lose the ability to talk, the Gospel. So it's going to be the first four books of the New Testament. They are.
Are you asking?
Yeah.
Oh, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John.
Right. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And then we're putting off the sours as long as possible. If you can't tell, we're delaying. We need to just do it.
to. I was gonna pray first, but I think.
Oh! I should have prayed! Go ahead.
I'm so scared.
Lord God, thank you for this opportunity
My palms are sweating.
to help spread the word.
Oh, gosh.
God, help us here in this house.
I have to eat the candy.
Help us not to get
I
sick
just put it in my mouth.
and any damage to be minimal. God, thank you for touching the people who watch this. Lord, help us in Jesus' name.
This makes no sense. I can feel
It was worse with the powder.
I can feel my jaw locking up.
Think about it, man.
That's sweet. Oh, God.
Just do it. Just do it.
Well, do you want a blue one or the pink one?
I'm totally cool with the hot. This doesn't seem like it's gonna go well for me at all.
Over and over.
Now, actually, I'll tell you after having eaten these, the outer bit, it's really sour on the outside, and there's a safe bit, and then the core, it gets crazy sour again. So it's not, once you think it's over, it's not over, it gets worse. But it gives you a few minutes. Go for it, man, come on, everybody else. He needs to take his hat off so they can see his face. Alright, so there are 4 Gospels. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. 2 of them are written by disciples, 2 are not.
Mm-hmm.
And so the disciples obviously were ones that actually walked with Jesus and actually traveled with him and taught with him and learned from him directly.
Those 2 being Matthew and John.
Correct, Matthew and John. You good?
Oh.
You're into the safe bit now.
No,
Don't crunch it.
There's sour in the
There's sour in the middle too.
I like that first one.
Oh, it hits the
Or
hard.
the good candy though.
They're actually good.
I'll say that.
This is banana.
The blue one? Really?
Blueberry banana, I think.
Oh, I didn't look at the labels. I knew they were labeled.
That was a good candy.
It is a good if you like
That
sour.
initial sour was fun.
No.
Okay.
The other ones, Mark and Luke, were not disciples. They came on afterwards, actually much like Paul. Luke was a traveling companion of Paul as he traveled in his, starting from his second mission on. And then Mark was, he followed around Peter throughout his discipleship. Or ministry, rather. Okay. If you'll have seen The Chosen, Matthew, tax collector. And we were actually just discussing this, that the way I read Matthew has changed since I watched The Chosen, because like I can see that like analytical mind that Matthew had, and the way that he writes the book of Matthew, you can see it's very precise, it's very accurate, it's very descriptive, because that was the way he was, and it was very, very precision based.
Right. Yeah.
And he says, you know, he's a Jewish man talking to a Jewish audience, trying to convince them that Jesus was the fulfillment of the Old Testament prophecy. And so I believe it, but we need to be able to prove it to a Jewish audience. So he takes the Old Testament and then goes by point effectively, and says like, this is what was promised, this is how Jesus fulfilled it.
Right.
Good?
I was on my finger.
Somebody else talk, I'm doing another one. I've still got one in my mouth, but I'm insane.
On the other side, completely different from Matthew, was Luke, as he said, walked with Paul, who wrote most of our New Testament. Luke was also detailed. They also did a lot of research from others, first-hand accounts, second-hand accounts, and compiled everything as best as possible, including genealogies, to try to make sure everybody. And he was speaking to the Gentiles, people who were not of Jewish faith and origin.
Luke was a Gentile.
You good?
Nope. I got two of these in my mouth right now.
Why?
So yeah, Matthew was a Jew talking to Jews. Luke was a Gentile talking to Gentiles.
Yeah. Mark is the oldest of the four, I believe.
He was the first.
He
was the first one that was
The
written.
first one that was written. So it's yeah.
No, the author was arguably the oldest.
Correct. But also the shortest, I believe.
It is.
It is the shortest of it.
I thought you meant like in stature.
It's just a short joke because I'm short.
I
Okay. That's how I guess you should eat.
I already got two of these in my mouth right
I
now.
want to try different flavor.
I'm gonna try the blue. What's the blue?
That's the banana one. The
Blueberry
blue's
banana.
banana. It's good.
Oh.
I'm not doing.
Once you get past that part, it's tasty.
That was so much work.
Come on, man. You're good.
I almost swallowed that whole thing.
That's horrible.
That whole thing almost went down the throat right there.
Doing the Heimlich hero.
You
too.
But once you get past the initial, it's like the original sour candy's not bad.
Yeah.
Oh, that one was so much worse than the first one.
Alright, I broke them.
Sorry.
Okay, the core wasn't as sour as I remember. That was alright. But yeah,
Oh man. Yeah, Mark, first written, shortest. The one that I can't find many people that ever tell me that it's their favorite. Honestly, as we were talking about.
I do think it serves an interesting purpose though, because like there are a lot of biblical scholars that believe that it was kind of intended, like, because he traveled with Peter, and there are people that believe that the reason it was so short was because it was intended effectively to be memorized. Because the way that it's written is like a very, I wrote this down, the way I wrote this was like it's really vivid and concise and like very action-packed.
And it only focuses on Jesus. Right?
Yeah.
The other Gospels have genealogies and outreaches and such. This is the only one that's Jesus at the beginning, Jesus at the end.
Yeah, it's it's emphasizing the call of picking up your cross and following Jesus.
Yeah.
It's like the whole emphasis behind it. Regardless, the way I
I don't think you need to do like 2.
But yeah, Mark, I feel like it was written as he's taking it away from me.
My teeth hurt, man.
Golly. But it's and having discussions with youth about the Gospels and kind of breaking them down. It's almost like this. Mark for me is a lot of almost like the slap in the forehead. You know, like pick up your cross and follow Jesus. You got opposition.
Yeah.
Pick it up. You know, like instead of being nice about it and kind of taking a long way to get to it, Mark's like, hey, whoop, there you go. Take that.
And that was kind of where I was headed with that, was that it seems to me that when I read Mark, it was written to be memorized by would-be evangelists, right? And it was written so that they were going to be going out into other cities, into other nations, and telling these stories. And there is this oral tradition amongst the Jewish community. They pass these stories on orally. And so I feel like that was kind of, there's nothing, I don't know that there's anything to back this up, but it feels to me when I read it like it was intended to be something for people to memorize. They could go out and they could tell people who Jesus was, and the storytelling, like an oration, kind of, you know what I mean?
Yeah. That
Like punchy, you know what I mean? Like you're saying.
The way I look at like Matthew, because I would say Matthew's probably my second favorite, like we were saying, pretty much just based on the fact that, yeah, buddy. I'll be honest, I'm not a blue flavored candy fan. The blueberry and banana kind of the blue banana snuck up on me.
Yeah.
Mark probably, Matthew probably being my second favorite. Again, just kind of like the way my brain is kind of relooked at Matthew. Matthew being as organized and as structured as he is, it's like detailed. It's very detailed in that standpoint. Would you say that Mark is a little more vivid in everything that and like just when it comes down to the works that Jesus did, or just basically like his description of everything's a little more, it's not so much in depth, it's a little more vivid and broad pictured, I guess you would say, through that.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting because, it comes right after, do it! It's interesting because Matthew comes right before that, and so we need to point out that Matthew, Mark, and Luke are what are called the synoptic gospels, and it's synopsis, right? Though a breakdown and an overview of the same story. And so Matthew, Mark, and Luke effectively tell the same story.
So absolutely.
I think it does.
Well, sour and sweet, yeah, it's supposed to get it. I've not had any yet. I'm trying to hold out. Oh. For comedic value.
It's just sticking to the roof of my mouth. Or when I put it, it just sticks. And I start to decide. Okay.
And so, oh goodness, the things we do for likes. And we don't even have that many of them.
That's really bad.
Okay. All right. So Matthew is talking about. He goes through and he effectively, like I said, he's looking at the Old Testament. He's saying he's trying to paint Jesus as a new Moses. And there's a lot of comparisons drawn, right? Because it shows Jesus coming out of Egypt. It shows Jesus passing through the water, right? The Red Sea or the river where he's baptized. It shows like the 40 years in the wilderness versus the 40 days. And he's trying to show that he is the new Christ, the new Moses, the new greater than Moses figure. Man, I can't think straight right now. I took notes. I'm glad I did.
2.
But he's did 2 of them.
Good. Good.
He wants to get it over with so bad.
Oh, my teeth!
My jaw.
That was the problem, is it stuck to the roof of my mouth and I couldn't get it down. So then when I ripped it down, it just was worse.
And I think it's interesting because Matthew, it effectively, it tries to show that, by the end of it, it shows Jesus talking to the Pharisees and talking to the people and painting him as not what was expected.
Right. No, yeah.
Because he's trying to show that like the impression that everyone thought that Jesus was going to, that the Messiah was going to be this triumphant king riding in on a stallion
Right.
in armor, and he was going to smite the Romans,
Mm-hmm.
and Jesus was the exact opposite, that taught that the greatest leader should be the greatest servant.
Yes.
And he took all of their preconceptions and flipped them on their heads. And so the book of Matthew effectively ends with him saying, Jesus isn't who we thought he was going to be. And then it jumps into Mark, where it's showing who Jesus actually was, which I think it's a cool
Nice
transition. Exactly. It's a good segue.
Yeah, I felt like Matthew was the perfect person to write Matthew, obviously. Makes sense, right? But because he was as detailed as he was, and because of the structure in which he used, it's also the perfect book to start off the New Testament, because there's so much emphasis put on Old Testament prophecies being fulfilled, right? And what the Old Testament said the Messiah would be, and who he would, like, when he would come back, and of those things. So I felt like it's just such a good, basically like a kickoff point for the New Testament itself, because there's so much emphasis on the prophecies themselves. And like you said, just saying that this is the Messiah, like this is the guy here. And yes, he doesn't fit what you think that person would be, coming in, that this is him, and this is why, and it's the detailed version of.
But it's like, after you've read a book, and you have an idea, you've built this image in your head. Yeah, I'm gonna let you do it. You told me I'm not allowed to do it anymore. And you have these ideas.
Right, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Doesn't that seem right?
Looks good.
Does it?
One more.
I don't know if I can handle it anymore. There's almost a hole in the tongue. No, what can we use to stop that up if we need to?
Now the last person.
Has to drink.
Here, I was just saying, the crazy part about this is the person that gets the last one has to drink, has to fold it and drink it.
I already did it once. Oh. I don't remember what I was saying now.
Yeah.
Talking about, like when you read something and you have this idea in your head of what it is, or someone describes someone, imagine that.
Yeah.
And you have an idea in your head of what they're like, and then you meet them and you're like, you're wrong, but you go back and the person's like, that's not what I said, this is what I said. Now, I misinterpreted that. You meant this. And so it's really important, because Matthew doesn't say specifically, like, this comes from Isaiah 26. But if you read the things that he's written, they're all directly, they're citations from the Old Testament. And if you go back and read them, you can and that was the way it was intended, was that the Jewish audience that he was writing to was going to go back, well, they already know it, because they memorize a lot of it, at least the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Old Testament. And so when he cites these things, they don't need to go back and look, they know them. And so he would say, well, this is the way we all interpreted it, me too. We were wrong, this is what it meant. And then if you think about it, you're like, oh, okay. The Bible wasn't wrong, my interpretation of it was wrong.
Yeah, absolutely.
As happens. Oh, so how do we know who's the last person? Have we all had, I don't know how many I've had, I haven't counted.
I've had 4.
I have no idea.
It was 3 or 4.
I'll be honest with you, I don't really care.
Oh.
I'm 100% not drinking that off. I can promise you that.
So Luke. You want to do Luke?
Hey, yeah. Favorite book, Luke, over there?
Right. I mean, honestly, there's not on the cover. There is, but. Go down the wrong pipe.
One down. You choke on it, man? Need the Heimlich? Is Batman alright? Batman survived.
Yeah, in the Batman comics, I imagine this is what the Joker's spray tasted like. It made everybody smile and go crazy.
I'm so sorry. This is amazing. Oh, I got to the core of that hell store. Sour.
Luke. As we said, Luke's companion of Paul.
He's a doctor.
Doctor with Paul. Dr. Luke.
Dr. Luke, and he traveled with Paul.
Yeah.
Dr. Luke.
Met him in Troas, I believe, on his second mission. He went there with Timothy, and I don't know if he met him or he already knew him, but then when he went to Macedonia, Luke traveled with them. So I don't know if he met them, and it's never really outlined exactly how they met, but he traveled with them starting from Troas to Macedonia. It was the first time he traveled with Paul and Luke, or with Paul and Timothy.
Yep. You know, Luke was Gentile that converted. They did interviews with people and research and paperwork. They categorized, organized as best as, I don't want to say prehistoric because this is history, but best as the time would allow. They didn't have computers or even floppy disks at the time. So everything handwritten they had to painstakingly go through. They had to line things up and lay them out for the Gentiles to understand. And with this, Luke included genealogies, time frames, so the Gentiles knew what was going on from point A to point B.
In a lot of ways, it was easier to talk to the Jews because they already knew the stories, they already knew the genealogies. And so if you said line of David, a Jew would know what that means. It has to be explained to a Gentile. And so Luke, being a Gentile and being a doctor, he's very precise. Again, very similar to Matthew, but he's a Gentile, he's not Jewish. And so what he did was he learned a lot of it from Paul, but he actually went around and interviewed a lot of eyewitnesses. And so his account is effectively that of an interviewer, right? Like a TV reporter going around and saying, like, you saw it happen, sir. Tell us what happened. And that's effectively what Luke is a guy who learned the stories secondhand and then went around confirming them and writing all of it down. And that's effectively what the book of Luke is. And actually, Luke is two parts. I would have forgotten that if I hadn't written it down. Forgot to mention it. That actually Luke is the only gospel that it's actually one of two parts. The second being Acts was also written by Luke. So yeah, it's a whole long story, and they split off one part of it, the gospel, the very beginning, before Jesus died, and then after. And so Luke wrote both Luke and the Acts of the apostles that came after Jesus died. Well, after he ascended.
Ready for another one?
I should imagine how.
Ready is a big word. All right. I'm trying not to drip the citric acid on my nice Bible. I've been trying to avoid that the whole time. Oh, that's a bad one.
Only one of mine so far had sour in the center. The rest of them.
Me too.
The yellow one, or the orange one, I just ate that sour in the center.
Same.
And that was
an orange one.
It was a pink one for me.
Alright. You took two at one point.
So we're doing?
Well, I mean, you had two at the very beginning. You've taken two. Alright, Luke,
You don't have to
do
do
it.
it.
I feel like at this
You don't
point,
have to do
I
it.
feel like at this point the camera's
If
seen
you want
it.
up, you can just spray yourself in the mouth.
The camera's seen it. The camera's
why?
seen it at this point, so I feel like I have to. Alright, yeah, Luke.
What's that kind of summarizes Luke?
And the second half being Acts,
Yeah.
which was Acts of the Apostles, the works that were done from people who followed Jesus. There's no emphasis on that, but that's not what we're focused on today. We're focused on Justin today.
Mentally preparing. I like the build up, just pumping himself up.
You need a trash can?
My
Yeah, and you're out.
teeth. Just actually, it is just rough on my teeth.
It tastes good.
Is that one mine as well, or is that yours? What are you doing?
That would be number 5 for me. So, well, he spit one out, so
No, I drew
Oh,
that
no,
one.
sorry.
I drew it.
Oh, it's mine. I'll do that one, but it's alright. Alright.
I chewed the one. I tried to spit out the citric acid that was in my mouth.
I got you. I think you had 6.
I didn't even
You had
taste it.
6. I had 4.
There were 16.
Yeah. So we each had 5 and you just took the 6.
I didn't have 5.
Oh,
I
really?
had 4.
Oh, you jerk.
I think
We didn't both have 3. Dude, that was so bad.
Oh. You good to drink that. get a glass. Oh, are you gonna do it? You gonna finish it off?
Oh, man.
What a champion.
That was so.
What a champion.
That made me cry.
This is more than one spritz worth.
It is.
Dude, you don't need another. Oh, dude, that's so nasty. Dog Prickle.
What are you doing? Why'd you do that?
Because I had 6.
What's the flaky stuff? Did this wear off? Am I gonna? No? That's from the candy.
We promise your son will be taken care of if you die.
Right.
Oh.
Like most sour candies and stuff, sour chocolate, it at least tastes good. Ain't nothing about that tastes good.
I like the banana one.
I'm talking about like the citric acid aspect.
It was strong. That is potent.
There's nothing about that tastes good. It's just sour.
All right, we're gonna do the shot, citric acid, and then we're gonna talk about the last and my favorite book.
You drinking that?
I haven't. I'll have to have some of it. You can have the rest.
Yeah.
I'm gonna chug this right after you finish that.
Oh, this will make me sick. I didn't look that up. How much citric acid does it take to get sick? I'm just.
We'll just choke on one.
It's so bad.
Oh.
I'm gonna digest my stomach.
Give it all you got.
All right, this is all you must. Oh.
Man, my jaw hurts thinking of this.
You want to do that one too?
Those last two.
No.
Those last two.
I'll
were
do
so
it.
bad.
Oh, I got the core of that one.
They were so bad.
Mm. That was another orange one. It's the orange one's the course of the worst one.
Mm-hmm.
If you want me to do it, I will.
Ha! Go. You almost got it all. You almost got it all.
It physically burns.
All right, John.
The Love Book.
What is that though, actually?
Ah.
Is that from the paper?
That is from the candy.
Ugh.
I'm burning off the outsides of the candy.
Burn out the edge of my teeth.
John. Gospel of John. My favorite.
So, John, yeah, it's my favorite too. So it's interesting though, because John, we don't definitively know which John it was that wrote it. But it's believed because the way he refers to himself in the book, he refers to himself as the disciple who Jesus loved. And everyone knows that there was one of the disciples named John.
That's quite arrogant. What do you think?
Yes.
I guess it is kind of in a certain sense because obviously Jesus loved all of the disciples. But the Bible does paint John in a different light. That him and Jesus had a very close relationship. That they were actually quite good friends.
Right.
He wasn't just a follower, that they were actually best friends. You okay, man? Yeah. Sour's going to his head. Are you watching Derek over here?
It hurts.
Should I tie this off?
I just look over and I said, quite arrogant, right? And Derek goes, yes. Took a deep breath.
There's another one.
That's so bad.
This is 100 times worse.
That is?
It dances on your tongue before you swallow it. I mean, it's like an
So, John.
electrical.
So why is it not a synoptic gospel? Why is it different?
You ask me hard questions after this. That's crazy. That's crazy that you.
Oh, this is so much worse.
I told you.
Oh! Lord have mercy.
I told you.
Oh.
could get you some baking soda. That way you have a buffer in there. You know, burp it all out.
Why did we do this?
I wouldn't do that again.
We won't. The next one's a spicy challenge.
I wouldn't do that again.
Oh.
Other options we got other than spicy.
Oh. What?
We could do a salty challenge.
What's the
That would
saltiest
shut
food?
me down.
Like sardines. What's the saltiest food we can think of? Oh, it's still burning on my tongue. I know what you're talking about now.
Yeah.
Oh. John. So, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, the Synoptic Gospels, they all tell effectively the same story, just from different perspectives.
Correct.
John is different because the way that the Synoptic Gospels effectively work is they're telling the story of Jesus. And in doing so, they effectively just repeat the stories that Jesus told, and he largely spoke in parables.
Right.
Right, and he says, like, the kingdom of God is like, and then he'll make some kind of comparison. He'll talk about how spreading seed, right, that if you spread it on a sidewalk, for example, right, if you just spread it over rocks,
Yeah.
there's nothing for it to grab onto, and so, but some seed is scattered on loose soil, some is scattered on deep soil, and it grows differently. So the way Jesus talked to people. He spoke more plainly to his disciples, but when he was, preaching the Sermon on the Mount and preaching these big congregations where he fed the 5,000, for example, he speaks largely in parables because they're easy to understand, but a lot of people still didn't quite grasp it. And it's easy for us 2,000 years to read later and read them and be like, that's so obvious, but yeah, we've got 2,000 years to have better understood it. A lot of people at that time didn't quite grasp it. And what John does is he kind of skips that entirely. There are some stories that are actually unique to the book of John, like the wedding at Cana. We only know about it because of the Gospel of John. But what he effectively did was he focused on the divinity of Jesus.
Correct.
And in the book of John, it's much more. There's a much greater emphasis on theology itself.
Yes. Yep.
I
would say that.
And
So
for me, it kind of paints this image in my mind of the relationship between him and Jesus. I feel like he had more plain discussion with John, and like John seems to have got it better than most people at the time did.
Yeah. Hypothetically, it's more black and white with John.
Yeah.
And then it's more gray with everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
Not that Jesus would you use the parable aspect, right? Like to me, it seems like large group of people were giving you a parable with John one-on-one.
Mm-hmm.
I'm giving you the direct, like I'm giving you what the parable means basically through that.
And Jesus does say that when he's speaking to his disciples, and that there's no other crowd. He says that to them at least on one occasion, where he says, "I spoke to them in parables, but you I'll say it differently to you because you should understand better. You should know better. You've been traveling with me for years,
Right.
and you should be able to grasp this better than they do." And that's what it feels like when I read John. Is it's one of those first-person, close to Jesus, one-on-one discussions.
Yes.
And he has a greater emphasis, a greater understanding of who Jesus is. And he emphasizes at the very beginning when he says explicitly who God is.
Right.
And he says, excuse me, he refers to the Word of God at the beginning in Genesis. The Word was with God and the Word was God. So both separate from God, but also one with God.
Right.
And so it seems like a lot of people at the time didn't quite grasp that. Obviously, Peter did, and obviously Paul did. I feel like even amongst the disciples, a lot of them still didn't get it. But John clearly did.
Yeah.
And so he emphasizes all throughout the book of John that Jesus was the Logos, the Word of God, made flesh.
Right. It's very poetic as well. John is the poet.
Oh, Cork.
How many of these time in your mouth?
That was the last one. I was waiting for it. I knew it was coming.
I thought we were done, and I'm like, my throat feels funny.
Mine's like, my tongue feels like, not,
It's numb.
yeah, like I get this weird taste.
It's acidic.
Just doesn't,
It's been
like,
burned.
You need to
that
gargle
messes-
some baking powder.
we're gonna have, the two of you, we're gonna have a meeting if this messes up my cheeseburger later.
Oh, dude, the cheeseburger gonna mess you up.
If it messes that up, I'm gonna be angry. Yeah, but just I feel like John is very passionate.
Yeah.
Like, which is where we get into like the poetic side of it. And I'd love to say, like, I tell people, I'd love to think that I would be John, but like, I think everybody would love to say that they would be John. You know, I would like to say I would be more John. I would love to say that I would be more like Paul, right? But I would do far more questioning.
As long as I'm not Judas.
Yeah, right.
Oh, yeah, the sweet helps. Oh. But you know, that's really where it stands. You know, if you all are familiar with Ravi Zacharias, if you're not, you should be. You should check out a lot of his work. He was an amazing apologist. And for those that don't know, a lot of people, I get this from a lot of people, it's like, what was he apologizing for? No, that's not what apologetics are. An apologetics is effectively just a theologian that's good at explaining. That's really all that means. It's an explainer, effectively, is what that means. And so he understood the gospel so well that he was able to very effectively explain. And when you ask a question, he can give you the biblical answer, not just his opinion. So he was very, very good at that. But I heard it said by him once, maybe he repeated it on multiple occasions, I wouldn't be surprised, that if someone came to him as a new believer and wanted to read the Bible for the first time, that he would recommend reading John 5 times.
Yeah. I remember reading that. Because
of that very poetic nature of it, John is really easy to understand.
Yes.
But the more you read it, the more you get from it, the more you understand.
Yeah.
And so he recommended starting with John, read that through 5 times, and then go back and do Matthew, Mark, Luke, and then jump into Acts.
I would think that it's a lot more, John is a lot more personal relationship with Jesus. Not, obviously, not that the other ones are not, but John is more purposeful in that, like a personal relationship for the transforming love and power that comes from Jesus and comes from God. The other ones obviously touch on that, and they lean that way, but John is more, to me, direct in that.
The other 3 feel like it's describing Jesus was at this place, and he said this thing to these people, and did this, and then he went to this city, and it repeats.
Right.
And John is like, here's the conversation we sat down at the end of the feast and had in private. And so, I adore John, but they're all good. We can rag on Mark as being no one's favorite, but like,
I don't think I've ever heard anybody say, I think Mark is my favorite.
Oh, the church, that's the only of the Gospels study book we have is Mark.
Is Mark, yeah. It is. It's the only small group.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because Mark we believe it was the first written, and there are a lot of people that believe that actually Matthew and Luke, when they wrote theirs, they used the book of Mark as reference material.
Yeah.
And so even though because you have to remember how many years later the books were written.
Yeah.
These weren't written the day after Jesus died. They were written some years later. And Mark was the soonest to the time. He was the one that interviewed all the people. And so, you know, now they're old men and they're trying to write these things. Yeah. It's like, it's just years removed by the time Matthew and Luke are written.
That's so bad.
But nobody died, not yet. I'll text all in the morning and let you know if I'm dead or not.
No, it's
My teeth and gums.
It's my tongue. I can't explain it. It's not like numb.
It's fizzy.
It has probably one of the worst aftertastes I've ever had in my life.
I think you fried something on your nose.
I think that's what it is. It's like I think about terrible aftertaste, and this is probably the worst that it's ever been.
Yeah, I bet the candies themselves aren't that bad now.
Probably not.
No.
I would never mind eating just one of the regular candies. Like this week, man.
He's gonna go into a coma tonight just eating the rest of the candies.
No, I'm leaving those with his kid. He likes sour candy. Let him have
Yeah,
it.
you can take it.
Oh.
Anywho, the Gospels.
But yeah, read them all. We can talk about, you know, the differences between them, but effectively they all tell the same story. And as with any book, you should read it from front to back. Just sit down and read the thing.
Don't read it literal. If you read it literal, you read it lazy.
Literal is lazy. And it is. That's a big thing that we hear a lot when people are like, well, it said this. Like, okay, yeah, but you're missing the context. It doesn't make sense without the context. He said that, but that's not what he meant. If you actually pay attention to who he was talking to and what he was talking about, you realize that's not at all what he was talking about.
Yeah.
So, yeah, literal is lazy. Love you guys. Assuming we're not dead, we'll see you again next week. In some shape, way, form, or fashion. We're actually in the middle of building a proper studio right now, so that's exciting. That probably won't be for another 4, 5, 6 months. But there will be new cameras coming far sooner than that, so quality will be increasing. We're looking for an editor currently to actually add some production value. So, exciting stuff coming, guys. Love y'all. See you later.
Get it. Keep it down. I just want it gone.
We need more soda. More sugar. Where's the sugar? Just pour some sugar in my mouth.
I was thinking maybe, since it's all acid, would baking soda help?